just want to say thanks to Ruth for putting this together. I love being able to share and let people know what's going on. If you want to go ahead and start the screen share, Ruth, I put together a little PowerPoint to sort of help just follow along. You guys might want to take some notes. Like was mentioned, it is being recorded, and we'll find a way to upload this probably to YouTube at some point, so that way if there's something that you miss, you can go back and listen at your leisure. So, but I really appreciate those of you who are joining us, and I know that there are others who are going to be watching the recording at another time, and I just want to thank you so much for coming and just being open to hear what I have to say. Like Ruth said, my name is Kim Kibitza, and I've been familiar with the emotion code and body code for a number of years now. There's my business card, so if you want to jot down my contact information, you're more than welcome. My mom had a health food store for about 25 years, and she's closed that and has been working in the area of natural health and as a naturopath for goodness, 20 years, more or less 20 years now. And so the idea of natural healing and alternative health has been something that I've been raised with. And then when my husband and I took our kids to Brazil for 10 years, we really had to be comfortable with addressing our health issues in our own way, without having the luxury of running to the doctor or, running to somebody every time something came up. So we began using the emotion code and body code, muscle testing, herbs, pretty much exclusively while we were there. And so now that we've been back, I've decided that I really want to focus on bringing a better understanding to people of a better way to live, a better way to heal. So what I do is I provide health consultations for people. So, people come in with ailments, and oftentimes it's mold. But we do testing using the muscle testing. And we also work with people who have severe trauma. So a lot of repeated severe childhood trauma, oftentimes resulting in DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. Some people know it as multiple personality disorder. And so that particular area of healing has become near and dear to my heart, working with survivors from severe trauma. And then as well, I do a lot of spiritual ministry and deliverance work, which has been really nice with the body code, because there's a large area within the body code that deals with a lot of things that are happening to us on a spiritual level. And so I do that from a strictly biblical perspective. So I'm not an expert. I don't have any fancy letters after my name, but I've been around a lot, and I've been able to see, I've been able to absorb the information of the people around me. And particularly working with my mom, who does have a lot of experience in this. And so I'm just taking what I know and what I've learned and the things that I use, and hoping to pass it on to you guys, whether you are a practitioner, or you can go ahead and forward that, Ruth, whether you're a practitioner or somebody who is receiving sessions. It's going to be information that's going to be beneficial for both of those cases. I'm not an expert, and so if you have questions, and you will be able to ask some questions at the end. I might not know everything, but I can definitely do my best and get back to you with the right answer. So fungus. Within the body code system, we get this one little screen here that you're seeing, and it's like, okay, mold and fungus. And a lot of times people wonder, well, what's the difference? Because we have these two different categories. Well, fungus, if you want to think of it as being the kingdom, and just like you have the kingdom of animal, and underneath animal, we have all different types of animals that fall under that category. So fungus is the same way. It's a large group with all of these subcategories underneath. And so a scientist will classify fungus in different ways. They'll look at, is it a single cell organism, or is it complex? How does it reproduce? Does it feed on decaying matter, or is it parasitic? And so just like a scientist is going to classify these different organisms differently, our body does too. Our body is going to want to put it into a certain order. And so there are things about these molds that the body recognizes a little bit differently. And so that's why we see the separation within the body code system. Some of the other things that we can differentiate between mold and other funguses is that whether or not they are a primary or an opportunistic pathogen. So when we're using the body code to test for this stuff, it's really beneficial to find out, is this something that is a priority to the body as being a primary pathogen, or is this something that's merely contributing to an overall problem? The other way that
Kim, an example of that is that when I see people with autoimmune cancer or something and they're not healing, this is an underlying core cause as to why they're not. It's not the primary reason, that their disease process or whatever, but it is an underlying. You get the underlying as well, and it enhances their healing.
Right.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And even so, too, with using the body code system, sometimes I'll just take a look at a specific organ. We need to be able to differentiate between what's a systemic problem and then what's localized, right? And so even if you're not seeing mold or fungus as a systemic issue, you can go into those organ and gland charts or go into the system charts and say, okay, let's just look at the pancreas, for example. Is there an active mold infection in the pancreas? And so there are several different ways that we can get to that through body code, which is...
the other thing you just said, too, active or inactive.
Mm-hmm.
And in the body code, we have pathogens, and then it goes down into toxins. So even if it's inactive, but you have the toxins from the mold or the fungal, this can be addressed as well.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so what I want to do is to present a little bit more information, some things that you won't see necessarily come up within the emotion code or body code. And like I said, these are going to be things that you can apply every day. You don't need to be into muscle testing or anything like that. So you're gonna hopefully learn something that's going to help you no matter what your situation is. So why is understanding fungus important? Let's go ahead and take a look at the next screen. Fungi is everywhere. It's truly omnipresent. The Gutenberg University published some research not that long ago, and they were able to measure that every single breath we take, we're inhaling 1 to 10 mold spores. So if you figure how many times you breathe in and out a day, that's a lot of mold that you're inhaling on a daily basis. And that's just what we're breathing. They didn't look at what we eat or what we touch or walking in the dirt. So just the fact that we are breathing, we're encountering fungi on a regular basis. And now the majority of fungi is not harmful, but the stuff that is can cause a myriad of health issues. So we had a report come out not that long ago. CNN did a story, and they interviewed some scientists from the Microbiology Society. And they estimated that 1.5 million deaths a year are as a direct result of a fungal infection. Now, that doesn't include all of the chronic health issues that were affecting people. They just looked at what's killing people. And yet, I believe that if this issue was truly understood, the doctors knew how to report it and identify it better, that 1.5 million, I think, is actually incredibly conservative. Yeah, thank you. And I really think that it's probably more dangerous even than bacteria and virus, to tell you the truth. So, but we're going to get a little bit more into that as we go. So, but there is a doctor from UCLA, a cellular biologist. His name was Dr. Jack Thrasher, and he just recently passed away. But he was quoted as saying that mold is a hidden pandemic that's sweeping across the United States. So it's something that is going to be affecting all of us, but we we really don't need modern science to tell us that this is a problem, because this is something that ancient cultures knew very well. They recognized fungus and mildew and mold as being a problem. And in fact, when you look at the God of Israel, in the ancient Hebrew writings, he talks about mold and mildew in Deuteronomy, but then when we get into the book of Leviticus, which are very specific instructions, mostly to the priesthood, in Leviticus 13 and 14, we get 2 whole chapters of how to identify mildew and mold on clothing and in their houses. And it goes into great instruction of, okay, if you find it, this is what you do. And if you can't treat it locally, then, you got to take the entire house apart brick by brick and carry it outside of the city. And so, the God of the Bible recognized that this was an issue for mankind, and that he didn't want us wearing moldy clothes, living in moldy buildings, because he knew if we did, we would get sick. So this is ancient intelligence that really modern day people know very, very little about. So being that it's in our air, it's in the soil, it's in our food, it's in our buildings, and it always has been. So, but why are we seeing such an increase in mold-related illnesses now? And that's something that a lot of people are asking about. When my mom got into this, doing the natural health stuff, she would see a lot of parasites. And over the last 15 years, the issues that come from fungus have just absolutely skyrocketed. And you would have to say, well, why is that? What's changed? And I believe that there are a handful of factors to answer that question. And I'm not going to go into all of them, but a few of the things that we really need to look at is our construction practices. Our building materials, the fact that we're making buildings that don't breathe anymore. We need to look at the weather. You have people living in areas, big flood zones, hurricanes, intensive rain, so we're getting a lot of water damage, and people just want a quick fix. They can't afford to take the time to really do these repairs properly. We can talk about the food trade and how we're getting food from all over the world. You have rice and grains coming out of very hot climates, and we just don't have the ability to check everything coming in.
Well, the high amount of sugar in foods.
Exactly.
Processing of foods.
Mm-hmm.
I actually worked with a couple people that had, they didn't drink coffee, but they drank tea. And the mold that actually is in the tea bag.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It went back to them, and I thought, gosh, everything.
Right. It really is everywhere. You have to be really careful about it, and it doesn't help too that we have been overusing antibiotics for so long. I would say probably most people realize that penicillin, the first antibiotic, penicillin, that it did come from mold. But one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is, and you can go ahead and forward to the next screen, antibiotic and mold are pretty much synonymous. Not this one. Go to the next one, and then we'll come back to this.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So antibiotic and mold and mycotoxin, which is the toxins that fungus produces, toxins, and those are called mycotoxins. Within the scientific community and within pharmaceuticals, there really is no difference between those two things. So we looking at this article here, and it says antibiotics and mycotoxins share many remarkable similarities in structure, metabolic roles, and biosynthesis, indicating their differences are primarily in the minds and economies of man, not the perspectives of the producing organism. So it's only, when we have this toxin, and the only difference, the only reason we call it an antibiotic is because somehow it's useful to us. It's still, it's antibiotic, right? Anti-life. It destroys life. So, and I'm not saying that you should never use an antibiotic. probiotic. They've saved many lives, but the sad reality is that we have been overusing them for so long, and so we are putting in, this mycotoxin byproduct all the time. But not only is it in us, it's in the water, it's in the food, it's in the soil and the plants, and so that's another factor. But the last thing, and this is something that a lot of people don't realize, is that the rising levels of electromagnetic frequencies have a profound effect on mycotoxins. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, he's a German researcher, and he knows of a study where they took mold cultures and they put it underneath like a Faraday cage. A Faraday netting. And every day they would go in and they would check the mold toxins, how much the mold was producing. And they were able to consistently show a certain amount. Well, then they removed the Faraday cage from the mold and they allowed the mold to be exposed to all of the EMF, the cell phone and internet and Wi-Fi and all of these things. And what they noticed was that the mold started to produce 600 times more toxins than when it was protected from those EMFs. But not only were the toxins more, they were also much more potent, much more virulent. And so as we move into an age where we are being bombarded all the time by these frequencies, not only is the mold within us producing worse toxins, but also the mold in our homes and whatnot. And so we're just seeing such an increase in not only our exposure, but also the level of toxicity. And if you go back then to the mosquito screen, if all of that wasn't bad enough, now we have articles like this: Frankenfungus armed with venom toxins could join the war against malaria. So that's not good news for me. Anytime they start to manipulate these things that really probably shouldn't be manipulated, I get a little bit nervous. So in addition to the regular mold and fungus, now we've got engineered fungus, and we even have evidence that they are weaponizing mycotoxins as well. And so if this has not been a problem for you yet, chances are in the future it will be, because we're just not going to get away from it. And, but it's like, well, okay, why should we care? Well, because the fungi and its toxins can be both a causative and a contributing cause to just about any kind of health issue that you can think of. Mm-hmm. So whether it's cancer or diabetes, depression, asthma, IBS, chronic fatigue, eczema, sinusitis, headaches, renal failure, liver disease, fibromyalgia, MS, ADHD. I mean, the list can go on. From whether it's strange pains that move around your body, or itchy ears, or birth defects, fungus always has to be a suspect, always. And when you have people particularly who are not well and they've been to all kinds of doctors and nobody can tell them what's wrong with them, absolutely fungus has to be the first place to start. So it can be a little bit frustrating, and it can be a little bit intimidating when you start to realize just how dangerous the world is nowadays. But we have not been left alone, and God has provided some really neat ways to be able to combat this. And so what we're going to talk about next is how can we use the how can we expand on the body code system so that we can do some testing and treatment. So, yep, there we go. So when I'm working on my family or on another client, I always go through this list for fungus. Okay, there are certain things that will not react to mold and fungus. So we go through each one. We want the body to be able to be a little bit more specific. So when I'm working with somebody, I would say, okay, we are testing for the presence of fungus, slime mold, mildew, yeast, mold, trichomonas, trichosporon, and we're going to give the body an opportunity to react to each one of those separately. So you have, and probably the one that most people know the least about, but is quite a common problem, is slime mold. Is everybody know what slime mold is? Is that something you're real familiar with? Yeah, Nicole's raising her hand because she's got it before. So Ruth, do you know much about slime mold?
Well, only because of my working with you. But
okay.
Was that ever brought up in my 41 years of nursing? No.
Okay.
So, yes.
Okay, so let me just talk a little bit about slime mold. They have actually reclassified slime mold within the last, I think, maybe 2 years. It used to be in the fungus family, and they've now placed it as an amoeba. But this was after many years, and because slime mold is one of those organisms that, depending on where it is in its life cycle, it kind of can morph between plant and parasite. So it's not quite a fungus, but it's really not truly just like a protozoan, and so it has a subcategory of its own. And most people will recognize slime mold because it's that yellow foamy looking stuff that usually grows in mulch, and it moves. And so sometimes like you wake up in the morning and it's right here, and then you go out in the afternoon and it's like 50 feet down the driveway. So the slime mold, it moves, and it can be slimy and kind of yuck, but then it can also be hard. It can look like kind of foam, and then when you touch it, it goes poof. So it's a little different because of the way that it acts when it's inside the body. And that is really, if somebody comes in and they're like, well, gosh, my shoulder, but then I'll wake up, in 2 days, it'll be in my elbow. And so it's this pain that kind of migrates. So it's moving around the body. And my mom was treating somebody who had some slime mold infection here in the jaw, and she was doing a topical oil, and when she put the oil on, she said she could feel it move over this way. And so it's smart. I was just reading an article today that the title of the article was something like, well, we know slime mold can remember, but can it think? And so they've done these experiments on slime mold, and they have found that they can teach the slime mold to behave in a certain way, and then they freeze it put it in like in a dormant stage for a year, bring it back out, and it still remembers what you taught it a year ago. And so it's a really fascinating organism, but in your typical antifungals, a lot of times won't do what you need it to do. And so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time about slime mold because it really is quite prevalent and something that a lot of people don't know about. So, but we can go ahead and forward to the next screen. So after we determine what is the species, and we also do the amount of species as well. And so, for example, if it's slime mold, we would say, okay, presence of slime mold, yes. Amount of species, at least 1, 2, 3, and we would go up incrementally until the body responds. So because the nice part of testing how many species are present is that then in a couple weeks when you go back to test, you can compare, okay, 3 weeks ago there were 5 species, today there are 2. So we're moving in the right direction. So it's nice to be able to get that baseline number of species that we're dealing with. And then we move into testing for the toxicity, because you can come into contact with a fungus and it might not make you real sick. So it's nice to know what our toxicity level is. So, and I want to be clear, this is not a quantitative, if you were to go into a lab and take blood, they're going to give you a quantitative number. Okay, that's not the way that the body responds. And so what we're doing is we're taking 100% and we're using that as our base. And so that would be equivalent to 0, like there's no mycotoxins. You'll never get anybody that doesn't have any, but it's where we want to start. And so we're going to measure by saying, okay, presence of mycotoxins. Mycotoxin level in the body, 100% being normal, there are at least, and we start with 100, we say 100, 500, 1,000, 1,500, and we're going to go up until the body responds. And then we know, okay, that's about where we're at. So we're generally looking for a number between 100% and about 5,500%. I've never seen anybody get to 6,000. I asked my mom the other day, she said, no, I've never seen it. If somebody were to come in, if there were to be somebody with 6,000% over their mycotoxin level, I don't know that they could be on their feet. When we see someone that has a mycotoxin level of 3,000 and up, you know, that person is in a lot of, they're in a lot of pain. They're really struggling. And so it's nice as you get familiar with what a normal number is, then when somebody comes in and all you have to do is see what their mycotoxin level is, and you can pretty much gauge like, oh, wow, you're not doing so well, you know, and it's nice because mostly they look fine from the outside. You know, they look healthy, but inside they're a mess. So we always text for the toxin level. So let's keep going. There's one more thing that is really important that we look at, and that is this MSH. And sorry, it looks like my screen is a little wobbly there, but I will, that's okay. I can talk through it. It's going to be fine. So MSH stands for Melanocyte Stimulating Hormone. Some people call it intermittent, so you can find it online under both names. And again, now that should be at 100% because it's a hormone. So we want our hormones to be at 100%. That would be optimal for us. So whereas with the mycotoxins, we're checking to see how far above normal those are. With the MSH, we're checking to see how low those are because we want it to be at 100. So if I'm testing for this, I would say, okay, we're testing for MSH, 100% being optimal. This person has at least, and so now I'm starting low, and I would start around 75 because to find somebody under 75 would be pretty rare. So you would say this person's MSH level is at least 75, 80, 85, 90. So you're working up to optimal. And the good thing about this, and this is actually a test that a lot of doctors will use. Some of the doctors that do test for mold will use MSH as an indicator to know how bad the mold is. But it is nice because there are things that happen when that MSH level comes down that don't seem to be related to each other. So people often come in with this wide range of symptoms and they just think that they're falling apart because none of the things that they're feeling seem to connect. And so if that MSH is low, we can offer some information and say, well, there's a reason why you're feeling all these things. And we're going to look at what some of those symptoms are. But also the other nice thing about testing for the MSH is that you can have a very high mycotoxin level because you were exposed to something. Let's say you walked into a building and it's really moldy. Your mycotoxin levels are going to spike. And then if you're healthy and you get out of the situation, those are naturally going to come down on their own, given that your body's able to handle that encounter. So, but if you were to come to me and your mycotoxin level is, let's say it's 3,500%, but I look at your MSH and that's pretty close to 100. So that tells me that whatever toxicity is happening, it might not be a chronic or a causative problem. So, but if you come in and your mycotoxin level is on the low side, but also your MSH is really low, then I have to wonder, wow, you know, this person is either they might be having very sustained exposures over long periods of time that's worn that hormone level down. So it is nice to know what the MSH is. And again, we measure that too. So in a month, we go back and we want to see, is that number coming up as the mold is going down? And it always does. All the time as we're getting rid of the mold, that MSH is coming up on its own. You don't need to take any fancy supplements for that, thankfully, because we know we spend way too much money on some of that stuff. So, all right, let's keep going. There's a couple more slides we need to get through. Oh, right. So the melanocyte stimulating hormone. This hormone is an integral component to our health. It helps regulate all of the other hormones in the body. And it determines how many of our systems function. So some of the things that you can experience if your MSH is considerably low, increased inflammation, and this could be things like asthma, digestive disorders, pain, often due to the inflammation, but also it inhibits the release of endorphins. So you can take things for pain and it doesn't seem to have an effect. Changes in body temperature, get a lot of night sweats, or, you know, you're cold 1 hour and then 2 hours later, you know, you're hot. sleep disruptions, changes in mood and energy, so you can be really fatigued and listless, but also it can change your ability to be able to cope with everyday stress. So we have kids that, come in and, here's a child, and normally you tell them, go do your homework, they're fine, they handle it. Well, when that MSH goes down, you tell them to go do your homework, and it's like the end of the world. I mean, crying and throwing themselves down, and I can't do it, The other thing that can fall, sorry. Are you still there?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I thought I had shut all of this stuff off. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
So when the MSH goes down, there's actually something that we call mold rage. It can make you very, very angry, lose your temper just at the drop of a hat. Difficulties in memory and learning, that's where you get your brain fog. Trouble losing or gaining weight. Being more susceptible to pathogens, low libido, excessive urination, dry mouth, reduced nerve repair, so you might fall or hurt yourself and you just don't recover as fast as you normally would. And then, of course, problems with the digestion. So as you can see, if you had 3 or 4 of these symptoms, you might really think like, man, I'm really falling apart, when it really all just comes down to whether or not that hormone is being produced. So that's MSH. Let's keep going. Okay, just a couple other things that are nice information to give your clients, and that is, where are they coming in contact with this fungus? Because like we had seen before, a lot of this stuff is microscopic, right? Ruth even said you can't really see it. So there are a lot of times where we just don't know where we pick this stuff up. And so if I'm testing somebody and they really don't know, then we can make a statement like, slime mold exposure percentage coming from food, or exposure related to food. And then we would start, okay, this is 10%, 20, 30, 40. So if it's 20% exposure to food, then we know that this is really more of an environmental issue. It's somewhere that they're going. Whereas if the percentage is higher on food, then we know, well, it's something that you're eating, or that you've been eating. So it can be very helpful for people. Actually, somebody that's in here on the talk too, there was a mold issue, and she's like, well, I eat so well, and, my house is dry. And we were able, to determine that it was through environment. And then we were able to narrow it down to exactly which building she was going into on a regular basis. So it's a good thing to be able to offer people. And then the other one is the HLA gene activation. And I have to admit, I have only recently started testing for this, so I don't have a whole lot of practical information. But if this gene is activated, the literature seems to suggest that it will inhibit the body's ability to respond to pathogens. And so you can get exposed to mold, and your body just doesn't recognize it as being an invader, and it will just allow it to sort of take over. So it can cause mold sensitivities, and it can be part of that, the answer to the question of, okay, we have mold in our house, 3 people are fine and 1 person just seems to be falling apart. Everybody's going to react different to exposure. And so this is something that can be a key as to whether or not somebody is responding to the mold appropriately. And this affects about 25 to 30% of the population. So that's a pretty good amount of people whose bodies aren't dealing with that particular pathogen appropriately. So, all right, let's go on to the next screen. Okay, it's a lot of bad news, right? It's a little scary if we start looking at all these different symptoms, and I could have done a whole hour just on symptoms. But there is good news. God has given us a way to support our bodies and to overcome the things that we encounter every day. Within the body code, of course, there's a lot of use of magnets, which are great to release some of those toxins with the energy. Dr. Bradley Nelson recommends neem and then tairachi, which the neem, absolutely, it is always in my cabinet. So yes, that is definitely a go-to. I don't know a whole lot about the tairachi. I know that there are other things, though, that are less expensive and just as good. So I believe that it's probably a very good product. I just don't find myself recommending it that often or really ever. But the herbs that we do use considerably besides the neem are Caudiarco, the cat's claw, graviola, and the graviola cat claw combination. There are other combinations out there that are really good, but if you could only pick, 4 herbs to keep on hand, these are the ones that you're going to want to go to. These are excellent antifungals, but they're not only antifungals. They do a lot of other things, but these are our go-to herbs. And what we have found is that mostly the energetic work for a mold infection is typically not going to be enough. The body really does need help with from the plants. And so I encourage people, have these things in your cabinet all the time. And then that way, when you have a feeling that you might have gotten, hit with something, just grab it, start taking it right away. Don't wait for yourself to get too sick. When you're testing for the herb, though, you can find out how much they can take. So let's say they're supposed to take, they need 6 a day. But you always have to check to see if it's safe, because when you're talking about mycotoxins, if there are already a considerable amount of toxins in the body, as the herbs are doing their job to kill the mold is fighting back. And so it's producing more toxins as it's dying. So you really want to be careful and make sure that that person can take 6 a day. You might need to start with 4 and then work your way up, because you don't want to overwhelm their detox pathways. And we'll just kind of skip down the bottom of the list just because we're talking about it now. We have the vitamin C and the activated charcoal. Now those are very good to add to aid the body in expelling those toxins. So be sure to add those if you think that you need a little bit of help with that. And the activated charcoal, though, you don't want to take that at the same time that you take your supplements. You always want to take that an hour or 2 after. So, but moving on, we've got the oils, and the oils are great as well. Of course, these are external use: the cinnamon, clove, myrrh, thyme, melaleuca, oregano. Remnant Remedy has a blend called Spice Defense, and it is my go-to. It's got everything that you need for antifungal, but it's antibacterial and antiviral too. Very reasonable cost, very high quality oil. So if you're looking for an addition with the essential oils, I can recommend that. And then we have the Halo and the Rife frequencies. A lot of people are familiar with Rife, using frequencies and sound waves to aid in healing, but probably not a whole lot of people know about the Halo, which is the photonic nutrition. And if you want to go ahead and hit the next slide, Ruth, I'll choose.
Just on this, Kim, I would also share a far infrared. Using
Right.
the blanket. I sleep in a far infrared magnetic negative ion environment every night.
Awesome.
And
Who
coffee.
makes that, Ruth?
Say that again, honey.
Who makes that? Is that Nikan?
Bacon. Yeah. Yes. And I found, remember when we were testing, coffee enemas also can help. And drinking the right water. I promote the pie water from Nikan, but it is so amazing, the contamination, and believe it or not, in water, how these molds can be in there, So drinking good water as well, and air filters. But
yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue into the Halo, because it structures water.
Yep.
So you can structure your water with this, and like I said, this is kind of new. It hasn't been out that long, but it's a photon botanical system. And so the inventor, he's a master chemist and has gone a botanist, and he's gone all over the world, and he's put together formulas of plants from around the world. And you have the essence of the plant in the vial, and you take the vial and you put it into the flashlight, and it shines a violet light through the vial, picks up all of the energetic information from the plants that are in there, and then deposits it both into the water so that you're drinking it, but then you use it all over your body. And so you're feeding your cells at a molecular level. Nothing needs to pass through the digestive system. It's immediate nourishment to the cells. My mom, like I said, she's been in this field for 20 years now. has been using a halo for about the last 2 years. She says she's never come across anything that is equal or that can stand up to this. So at least from our perspective and what our experience has been, it's been a wonderful addition to just the way that we stay healthy. And since I've been using it, I haven't really had to do herbs that often because I'm just every day nourishing those cells. So that's what the halo is. If you want,
isn't that wonderful when you become balanced? How little you do need. That's what like I worked with chiropractors, acupuncturists, nutritionalists in conjunction with the emotion code and body code, and the same with the halo. When you balance the body, you don't need this, pantry full of nutritionals.
Yes, thankfully, it's expensive. Who wants to take all those pills all the time?
That's right.
For that. So we are wrapping it up, and so if you have some questions, you'll have an opportunity to ask. But there's so many things that we could have gone into. Really, this little presentation has just scratched the surface. So I want you to be aware that there's a lot of good information out there online. The Moldy movie was produced by Dave Asbury from Bulletproof, and I believe it is still available to watch for free on YouTube. You might need to look it up under the British spelling of mold, Mouldy, but that is a fantastic documentary on mold. Know the Cause is Doug Kaufman, momsaware.org. The book, When Traditional Medicine Fails, Your Guide to Mold Toxins. It's short. It's an easy read, but a lot of really practical information in there. And then Toxic Mold Project. They just did a Toxic Mold Summit online. They're now charging for access to the videos. So I would start with the free stuff first, but it is a good place to go if you want to hear like a lot of the experts. These are doctors and nutritionists and functional medicine people. So there's a lot that we can learn, and we need to keep learning because the information changes all the time. So, all right, I think we've got maybe one more slide left, Ruth.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ruth had already talked about the importance of maintaining our health using the emotion code and body code, and that is something that is so easy. I mean, what other way can you balance your system basically for free, right? I mean, it really doesn't cost anything when you know how to use it, and so we really need to be doing this all the time, so that way when we are in a situation where we are confronted with these things, our body is free to put the energy towards the systems that it needs to and not be putting out too many fires. So I can't say enough about the emotion code and body code system for that. Now, we do, though, need to make sure that we're creating a fungus-free environment, whether it's inside and internal or whether it's external. So internally, we need to watch what we eat. Ruth had already mentioned sugar because sugar feeds bugs, right? Corn is another one. Please, please, please watch your corn. And unfortunately, corn is in 4,000 products on the grocery shelf. I mean, it's everywhere. High fructose corn syrup. So corn is universally contaminated with mold. So really try your best to eat as little corn as possible. Peanuts, pistachios, certain fruits like bananas, strawberries, tea. Ruth also mentioned the tea. Tea and coffee, you need to be careful. Make sure that you're buying good organic teas and coffees. And also, if you can, throw away your coffee maker. Anytime you have heat and moisture, you're going to have mildew. You can run lots of vinegar through there, and you're still not going to get into all of those parts that are breeding mildew. And so in our house, we use an electric percolator or a French press, because you can wash all of the parts. They can dry out completely before you use them again. You would be surprised at just one little change, just getting rid of your coffee maker, how that can make a big difference. Again, another thing that's easy to change, your mattress and pillows. I know mattresses are not cheap, but there are people who are sleeping on mattresses that are much older than they should be sleeping on. And again, with pillows, they're not that expensive. I challenge you, do a Google search, pillow mold, and see what you find. It's awful. You're putting your head there and you're breathing in these spores all night. It really doesn't take a lot of money to make sure that you're sleeping on a clean pillow. Please don't be tempted to do mold remediation on your own. it is a disaster. If it's simple and you know what you're doing, okay, but you can create such a bigger problem for yourself by doing mold remediation when you don't do that regularly. And please don't let anybody tell you that you can just wash that with bleach, because it does not work. So don't wash with bleach. That actually makes it worse. There are some really good cleaners out there, though. If there is an area that you think you can handle on your own, and you can get most of these probably Amazon or online, Benefect, TKO, it's an orange cleaner, Lime Away, Borax is great for laundry, and then US Enzyme. Some of these are actually enzyme products that will eat away at the mold. So if you're going to try to clean, that's the way to do it. We have the ozone generators are also very good at taking mold out of the air and out of surfaces. BioBlaster is a company that I know of personally, and they make a really great product. So their website is there if you're interested. And also Ruth had mentioned the air purifiers. If you go to work and you know that if you've got mold in the building that you work in, buy a little air purifier. They're small now. They don't make a lot of noise. Clean the air in the space that you're in. But to just sort of to end things, it's a lot to take in. But also it is very possible to be healthy and to be well. Our bodies were designed to be able to handle this stuff, but we need to watch how much we're bombarding our systems and creating a space that we can heal. And really, it's important that we all know about this, because it's different than a parasite. You can go somewhere and get a parasite and, you get rid of it, and you might never encounter that parasite again. Fungus is different. You're breathing it in right now. And so what the important thing is to manage your exposure. Know how to recognize it and how to treat it as you're encountering it. So that way it doesn't get into, it doesn't develop into cancer, or it doesn't develop into diabetes or asthma. So we just have to learn how to manage it when we encounter it, because it's out there. But, we can do it. We've been given the equipment and the tools to do so. So I've seen just so many people absolutely devastated their health, through fungus and mold infections, who have come back to just be incredibly healthy, and they can't believe I was ever that sick. Never imagined feeling better. So if you know somebody out there who has some pretty serious conditions, and especially, they start talking about Lyme's, a lot of Lyme's actually mimics mold symptoms too. So there is information out there. There are people who can help. Ruth is learning a lot about this. I know she's available she's going to start incorporating a lot more of this stuff into her sessions. I'm available. My mother is available. She sees people, and she can do remote sessions as well. She definitely has a lot more experience than I do. So if it were a complicated case, I would get her involved. But there are good people out there who really are doing their best to bring this information. So if you know somebody that needs this, point them to the recording once we get this uploaded. And hopefully we will all be healthier and happier for it. So do you guys anybody have any questions? I don't know how we're doing on time, and I know I went really fast. I'm sorry, but if there's any questions or comments that anyone has, I'll do my best.
Please unmute yourself if you're muted, and we welcome any question.
So a question I have is, some of the things that you're doing to get rid of mold or a fungus, could it also help get rid of maybe a parasite?
Yes, absolutely. Especially like the neem, the Paudiarco, a lot of those have qualities that address many different things. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I would say probably 70% of my clients are on neem.
Wow.
Yeah. At some point, during our journey together, mm-hmm. It's utilized that high of a need.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, you get a lot of coexisting pathogens, and so you might have fungus, but then there's also an accompanying bacterial infection, and I think that's why a lot of people, when they go to the doctor and they get an antibiotic, they say, oh, well, it may be better. And it's like, well, yeah, because it killed the bacteria, and then it also worked on some of the mold toxins too, because one mold toxin will kill another fungus. And so you can get better by using that kind of stuff. But a lot of times these things they're working sort of together, and they all like to sort of congregate in weak areas, right? And so that's another thing too, is strengthening those weak areas, and so they don't have as many places to congregate. It's always good too. It's a good question.
I never put it together, but many of my long-term patients on antibiotics in the intensive care, they end up going on fluconazole, which is antifungal. And I'm going, oh my gosh, this is out there. We need to educate.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I have a question. What is that? Yeah, I heard you talk about the halo, and just looking at it, it looked like a flashlight. Is that?
Yes, it's almost like that.
Yeah, there are actually two versions. There's the flashlight version, and it looks like a fancy flashlight. And then there's a clinical version that the flashlight version, you can do one vial at a time. The clinical version that they use in doctors' offices and vets and on ranches, and it's about this large, and the vials are about like that, and you can do about 6 at a time. So there are two different options, but the flashlight version is really the one that most is going to serve for most people.
So when you say a vial, what are you talking about? Water?
They're little glass vials. I could probably go grab my mom's that's sitting over there. Dad? He's there. So they're little glass vials, and the vials don't run out. And so it would be similar to like an essential oil or a homeopathic, where you've reduced the plant to its energy signature. And so you're putting that little vial into the light and shining the light through it. And we know that light carries information. Want to bring to the halo? Yeah. The light carries information. So it passes through the vial, picks up the information from the plants, and then puts it directly into the body or into the water that you drink. So I'll just take it out so you can take a look. And
so you're energizing a vial, and then you're pouring that into something you would drink. I'm still not understanding.
No, you're showing the light. And Darlene, I think, maybe we could even do at some point a YouTube on this.
Yeah, I think that would be good, because we could spend a lot of time just talking about this.
Yeah.
So the vial goes into there, okay? And then the light gets turned on.
Right.
And so the light is passing through the vial, and then you can shine it into water and structure your water, and then you're drinking it.
It's like putting also a magnet at the bottom of the glass, or putting positive words. It's putting positive vibrational energy into the water, and you're taking it in.
Right. So the vial, they stay shut. You're just taking them in and out. So that's the halo. And like I said, if you want more information, contact me privately, and I can get you more information on that. And I think maybe Nicole had a question too.
Yeah. Come back, Nicole.
Oh, you're. Yeah. So how often should we be rechecking somebody?
Well,
like, how long do we leave them on the cat's claw, or how long do we then go before we check again to see if they need to be on something else or if it's getting better?
Well, it really depends on the person and how severe their case is. Sometimes, Nicole, I'll tell people, you know what, take this for, 3 to 5 days, see how you're feeling. If you think you still need to continue, keep going with it. And sometimes we never look at it again, because the symptoms go away and they're doing fine and they don't need it. Whereas in other cases where it's a little bit more profound, I know my mom has a 1-month policy, so she often asks people to come back after a month. And that's what I've been doing too, allowing it to, to give it a few weeks to a month to really allow the body to show some changes. And so, if you do it in a month, and then you can also, And it's important to do that when you're dealing with somebody that's got a little bit more of a complicated infection, because just like you'll have like one mycotoxin antibiotic will work against a certain group of bacteria, it's the same with antifungals. And so you might have, for slime mold, for example, you might have neem, and that's going to take care of 3 or 4 different species. But then once those 3 or 4 species are dead, you have to switch to something else to take care of those last 2. So you kind of have to sort of play that, not all the time, but it happens enough to know, like, if you get to the point where, man, you know, they've been on something for a couple weeks and they're just not getting any better, then check to see you might have to switch to a different antifungal.
And also on that note, what I have seen is that, you know, you can muscle test and you find that they need this certain amount. I always start slow because to start them out sometimes at what is recommended. What you can find is that they're going to have the die off and they're going to get so sick they won't continue, or, you know, they let themselves tolerate but keep progressing. Well, and it's just, you know, maybe that's part of my nursing. Start small. You can always add to it, but you can't take it away, you know. So,
That's true.
but, you know, it's really been serving me well to do that. And also, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, it's surprising how much mold, you know, don't brush your teeth once or twice, brush your teeth more often, or use something to take the mold that actually can come from this part of your being, the head, the nose, and the mouth. So, you know, I spray with colloidal silver every once in a while.
Right.
Yeah. And it just, I feel keeps everything out of bay. You know, like I say, I have learned to understand prevention. You know, I've seen, I work quite often with autistic children, behavioral OCD, and 99.9% of the time, yes, we clear the emotions, we clear things, and there is also this component of mold or fungal along with it. You nip both of them in the bud, and all of a sudden the OCD is all gone, or all of a sudden the child is sleeping through the night. You know, they're like you said before, where no, I can't do that. You know, you're saying the same thing to them, and they're going, oh, sure. And you just go, wait a minute, whose kid are you? You know? So you really don't want to lose these tools. You know?
Right. And it's usually a combination of different things, you know, and so we end up pulling from all this different information. It's rarely just one thing that's going on, you know.
This is the beauty of the community of coming together, because you taught me, and we're sharing. I've you know, shared with other things with you, and this is you know, really where we're coming together, because there's a lot that we can do to make this world better. And Kim, I just want to thank you for sharing your knowledge tonight, and all of you for coming to share in this amazing opportunity. And
Yep. Shalom, and thank you, everybody. Blessings on everyone.
Shalom. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Ruth.
you bet. Bye.